Hello, this is Todd from ConcretePumping.com. This video that you're about to see comprises two gentlemen that helped start the concrete pumping industry, Richard Bennett and Marvin Bennett. This interview was done on March 6, 2011.
In 1954, 53, 54, I was an iron worker. I was working in Lancaster on the Lockheed hangar, one of the largest hangars at that time, putting in a stairwell. At the other stairwell, stairs, iron stairs that went up the stairwell. At the other end of the building, there was a masonry contractor building the stairwells. And he was using a pump to pump the grout into the block walls. And it was nothing more than a number 6 mono pump on the bottom of half of a 30-gallon drum with a gas engine driving a gearbox driving the mono pump. And he was having all kinds of trouble with it, so I'd go down when we were waiting for iron and help him out. And we became acquainted. Sherman, I believe, was his name. And he hired me to build him a concrete pump using a number 10 mono pump.
What year was this?
1954.
1954.
And I arranged with the shop that I was working with to rent space and a welding machine and equipment to build him a pump. And I built a hopper that held 2 yards that was similar to a plaster mixer, and the number 10 pump came out the side, and I had the gearbox and everything on it, and it actually pumped grout. And we pumped 2 or 3 jobs, and one day in Pasadena on Foothill Boulevard, I was in a gas station, and a young man in a pickup truck pulled in behind me, and he says, "What's that?" And I said, "It's a grout pump." And he says, "It pumps grout?" And I says, "Yes." He says, "Does it pump it successfully?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Follow me." And we went back to the Switzer ready-mix plant. And they were building a housing project in 29 Palms out of panels that were called Switzer panels, and they were panels that they would cut in Pasadena and assemble in 29 Palms at the Marine base.
Mm-hmm.
But where the panels joined, they had to be grouted, and the hole was 3 inches in diameter, and they were pouring the grout in with a bucket. And I got there and pumped the grout, and they were happy, and I was hired on the spot. But I walked the 6-inch wall, 6-inch wide wall, the height of a building, a house, 10 feet high, with that 3-inch hose, and one day was enough for me.
Yeah.
And so I told the owner who owned the pump that I quit. And he said, "Oh, that's all right, I'll do it." He went out, he lasted half a day.
Mm-hmm.
And then we made an arrangement to where I would pump the job and I would buy his pump for 10% or something like that of the profits or whatever. So I took that on, and the number 10 mono pump, if you're familiar with them, the rotors are very expensive, about $1,000 each. The rotor would last maybe 3 or 4 days. So it was expensive.
And the progressive cavity pump housing wouldn't last very long. It was rubber.
What was the mix design? Was
It was pea gravel and cement.
those 3/8 inch rock?
3/8-inch rock with a lot of cement
Yeah.
to allow it to be pumped.
How many yards per hour?
5.
5 yards
3
per
or
hour.
4. It wasn't what the pump could put out. It was what I could place in the wall.
Right. And what did you charge? Did you charge per hour or?
I remember $12.50 a yard. That's,
Flat rate?
yeah. And with this going on, of course you remember that's a few years ago, I decided there was a better way to do it, and I built a bladder, I don't know what else to call it, a bladder pump.
What year was this?
1954.
This was 54 still?
55,
Yeah. Okay.
1955. And it was a hose about 3 feet long and
Longer than that,
4 feet long.
longer than that,
5 feet. 5 feet long.
'Cause I made
In a 6-inch pipe,
Mm-hmm.
2 of them with a ball valve intake on each end and a ball valve discharge into a Y. Between the 6-inch pipe and the hose was water to a cylinder which was driven by a hydraulic pump so that it would squeeze the hose.
How'd you come up with the idea?
This Sherman mentioned that there was a washing machine at the time that the squeeze, that the housing was rubber, and to get after the rinse cycle, the rubber housing would squeeze in and squeeze the water out. So I thought, squeeze water out, squeeze concrete out.
Nice. Yeah.
And so that is what we used there at 29 Palms.
But he forgot to tell you that maybe 2 years before that, in my backyard, we had, in my garage, we had there in La Cañada, he had built what I call a prototype of the Challenge squeeze pump.
Yeah, boy.
And it was only about 3 feet in diameter, and we rotated it using an electric drill motor, but it would actually do the same thing that the Challenge squeeze pump did. But we decided it wasn't practical,
Hmm.
so we dropped it.
So you built that prior to 1954?
I think that was around the same time in that area.
Yeah,
But I remember that now. We were pumping with the drill motors, he said, and it stopped. And we opened it up and the whole inside was full of plaster because the hose had broke. And he says, that's it.
That's not gonna work, yeah.
of course, Challenge perfected the hose to a point where they could use them.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
But then when Tommy Thompson bought us out, is that correct? You know more
now
about
wait,
that.
then Marvin with his squeeze pump out there at 29 Palms, there's a number of people that are trying to find a grout pump in the world. They couldn't find one in Europe or any place to do their jobs. So when we finished out there, we tried to develop that idea further to pump grout, and then but in the meantime, Tommy Thompson heard about it, and he'd been searching for a pump because he was a Western distributor for the Easy-On machine, plaster pump, was switched back to the rotor and stator again, which would wear out too fast. So he made a deal with us to design a plaster pump that wouldn't wear out. And it's the plastering industry and that pump that we built for them that got us further into concrete, because we had the same kind of problems. We had cylinders that would wear out, we had piston cups that were no good, and so on and so forth. But we finally found a hard chrome plater company that could put hard chrome in the cylinders, and we used leather cups, and we got a piston pump to finally work pumping abrasive material. And that was back in 1956.
Up to this point, had there been anything that you guys had created that you could use and actually generate revenue with, make money? Because it sounded like the cost of the equipment wearing out.
You forgot that we built the finish machine of it.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, but no, but prior to that, I was still working as an electrician, and I was supporting him and his ideas.
That's right.
And, no, we didn't come up with anything that was commercially practical until we made a deal to go with Tommy Thompson, who had the money to finance it, because he
And
was
the
a plastering,
connections.
he was a plastering contractor and well known. But we went with him, and I don't know if you know about zonalite or not, but zonalite is a vermiculite material, which is rather lubricating instead of abrasive. So we developed this little S1, we called it, little 2L3 moino pump that pumped this finished materials in zonalite. And those were sold all over the United States, and that got us started into a situation there with Tommy Thompson that we could take time then to try to further develop this piston pump for plaster, because plaster was with sand and that was abrasive.
So when you say you sold to Tommy Thompson, what did you sell to him?
Nothing.
Just us.
Okay, so did he bring you on as partners, or
After a few months, we'd signed a contract with him to be a partners, 50-50, if we could develop this piston pump by a certain date. Well, it took a lot more money and more time than we thought, so our contract was gone.
Right.
But we talked to him, he said, well, he'll spend some money a little longer to see if we can get it going. Because we were just anxious to make a pump, we didn't.
yeah?
And so after another, I guess it was 8 or 9 months, we finally, Marvin's idea of a compensating piston pump, which is really a single cylinder pump with a cam that operates a slave piston, which makes a smooth flow. Well, we finally got that working, and that then became the Model S2, which was a small plaster pump. Now, in the meantime, we were still selling and servicing Moino Easy-On machines, and one day Tommy says, take your STU out to this job and see if they'll try it. So I put it on the back of the pickup, took it out to the job, set it next to the Easy-On machine, tried to get them to switch over, and they stood up there on the scaffold and laughed at me because the S2 was so small and the Easy-On was so big. But I finally talked them into it. I don't know how I did by embarrassing them to hook it up. And that was early in the afternoon. They hooked that thing up, never turned it off. And they bought it on the spot.
Wow.
And so,
And that pumped pea gravel?
no, that
Plaster.
was still
Plaster.
pumping sanded,
Sanded.
gypsum
Gypsum.
and sand,
Okay,
which is
Yeah.
abrasive.
right.
Okay? But later on, so we got into the building plaster pumps. That's got us in the pump business.
Okay.
They became successful. They made a lot of money for Tommy Thompson, which paid him back for all of his investment.
Right.
And so then we had to build a bigger plaster pump, which became an A3, and it was just a bigger. It had first an 18-cylinder engine, and it had 18 horsepower gas engine, and then we went to a 24 horsepower gas engine. And one day Marvin got a phone call from this guy over in Nevada. He said, can you change that A3 to pumping pea gravel grout for me? Marvin says, sure. So we took the A3 plaster machine, by the way, which is still being produced today exactly like Marvin designed it. Not bolt for bolt. But he took that A3 and opened up the 3-inch cylinder to 6-inch cylinders, made a bigger manifold, shipped it to this guy, and the darn thing worked, and he loved it. And that started the pea gravel, as far as we know, the pea gravel grout pumps.